lives back when they are struggling. These bills reflect the voices of veterans, VSOs, stakeholders who have asked for exactly that kind of opportunity. Many of these bills are forward-thinking proposals to make VA work better, and I hope we can advance them in a bipartisan way. With that, let's go. And Ranking Member, you're now recognized for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll save my comments for individual bills and I'll yield back.
All right, thank you. I now call up the committee print for the HR 7683, the VA Fiscal Management and Modernization Act. The clerk will report the bill.
HR
The text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules and without objection, the first reading and dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendments at any point. I now recognize Representative Berkman for the purposes of offering an amendment to the nature of a substitute.
Well, looks like we're off to a good start here because I don't see that. Just take a look at this. I've just got my remarks on the bill.
Yeah, so just say I have an amendment at the desk.
I have an amendment at the desk.
You do. The clerk shall report the amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of a substitute is dispensed with, and ask that it be considered base text for the purposes of the markup without objection so ordered. I now recognize General Berkman for 5 minutes to speak on support of his amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's nice to be back in the aircraft. Accountability matters, especially when it comes to the health and well-being of our veterans. VA manages a budget approaching $500 billion, and veterans deserve confidence that those dollars are being managed responsibly. The VA Fiscal Management Modernization Act designates the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Budget, formerly the Assistant Secretary for Management in the text, as introduced, as the department's chief financial officer in statute, with clear responsibilities spanning budget formulation, execution, auditing, reporting, and Anti-Deficiency Act compliance. The title change better reflects the office's core functions, and the ANS also adds major acquisition program management as an explicit CFO duty. The bill establishes the dedicated deputy level leadership for planning and budget and for financial operations and internal controls, and requires VA's financial officers across VISNs to report exclusively through the CFO. Not least, it creates a legislative and congressional budget information office with one job, providing Congress accurate, timely, and certified budget information. Clear authority, a defined chain of command, a direct line to Congress. That is how you build the accountable financial structure our veterans deserve. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself in support of the amendment. I would like to thank the General for taking the lead on this VA Fiscal Management and Modernization Act. The bill cements VA's internal realignment to modernize VA's financial management, including how VA controls accounts for settles and reports its finances. The Biden administration did a terrible job of managing VA multi-billion-dollar budget, and Secretary Collins is still trying to clean it up. At a hearing in February, the Secretary stated the VA was unable to complete its monthly reconciliation reports, an alarming admission for any federal agency, let alone one with an annual budget appropriating $500 billion. That's unacceptable. The VA Fiscal Management and Modernization Act would establish clear roles and responsibilities, strengthen accountability, and ensure VA has the structure necessary to manage taxpayer dollars with the transparency, discipline, and seriousness veterans deserve. Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute on HR 7683? Seeing none, are there any amendments to the amendment of the nature of a substitute? Oh, Representative Sell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure, generally speaking, that these bills have an offset, both mandatory and discretionary as we go, because we're $39 trillion in debt. And I just want to make sure as we go through this entire chart that we're all assured that they are all offset.
It's staff and myself have worked continuously to make sure that each one has offsets as we move forward.
Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Are there any amendments to the amendment in nature substitute to HR 7683? I now recognize Ranking Member Takano to offer an amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute for HR 7683.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the amendment in nature of substitute to HR 7683 at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Takano Amendment.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, my amendment today would establish a limit on the number of political appointees within the Legislative and Congressional Budget Information Office. Representative Bergman's stated goal of this office is to provide, quote, accurate, timely, and certified information regarding the finances and budget of the department, end quote. Just earlier this week, committee staff was briefed by Mark Engelbaum, the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Human Resources and Administration, that VA must start shifting to a more aggressive planning cycle in regard to the budget for staffing, infrastructure, and other resources. That type of planning requires stability. That stability is often provided by career VA staff, not political appointees. These career staff are often the ones who have spent years in the department and know the intricacies of VA's numerous programs, its government structures, and its employees. This is the kind of knowledge base we should be encouraging in an office such as this. While political appointees may have a role in transmitting the president's wishes as it relates to the budget, the excessive and over politicization of planning and financial management is concerning. Over the last nearly year and a half, we have seen a rise in the number of political appointees serving in roles traditionally held by career staff, followed by a subsequent decrease in the accessibility of information to veterans, Congress, and the public. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting the career workforce and vote yes on my amendment. Now, before I conclude, I want to note that the text of this bill creates conflicts with another bill that the majority is moving forward. Representative Barrett's HR 633, the Acquisition Review and Cost Assessment Act, or ARCA, This bill is on the committee's legislative hearing agenda next week. Now, if both bills were to become law, they will create conflicts that will make implementation difficult, if not impossible. During the Oversight and Investigations Subcommittee's consideration of this bill, we raised concerns about reconciling this bill with ARCA and encouraged a bipartisan effort to work with the Senate sponsor of ARCA, Senator Moran, to deconflict the text. But that has not happened. Further, while VA is actively consolidating acquisition activities within the Office of Acquisition, Logistics, and Construction, the bill before us today would attempt to consolidate other acquisition functions under the Chief Financial Officer, creating more conflicts. There is a troubling trend by the CFO's Office of Consolidating, there's a troubling trend by the CFO's Office of consolidating financial acquisition and programmatic activities. This is particularly true in the case of the Community Care Network Next Generation contract. I'm deeply concerned by the creation of conflicts of interest between the critical administrative functions at VA, where accountability and transparency are undermined. Thank you, and I yield back, sir.
Gentleman yields back, and I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. I oppose the amendment because it would protect the same budget bureaucracy that failed to give Congress the full and accurate picture for the budget shortfall that wasn't in 2024. We recognize the need for continuing of government, but we cannot mean to shield career office officials for accountability when they are slow, unresponsive, or wrong. During the Biden administration, career officials were responsible for the budget information provided to Congress, and Congress was misled about the VA's budget shortfall. The office that handles budget information for Congress must be accountable. If it fails to do its job, there must be someone who can answer for the future failure. The amendment would limit the accountability and leave Congress dependent on the same employees that had already failed veterans and taxpayers. For this reason, I oppose the amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment?
Well, I appreciate the ranking member's interest in this bill. I will have to oppose the amendment. Let's remember what happened during the most recent budget shortfall scare at the VA a couple of years ago. It was career bureaucrats who came to Congress in 2024 claiming a $3 billion shortfall and warning of disruptions to veterans' benefits, only for the VA to carry over more than $5 billion in unspent funds. Career bureaucrats who are too often insulated from accountability that would prevent that from happening again. This bill is designed to fix that. The Legislative and Congressional Budget Information Office will give Congress accurate, timely, and certified budget information. And restricting who can staff it doesn't strengthen that mission. It protects the culture of unaccountability this bill is trying to change. The office is also capped at 6 employees, making this restriction unnecessary on its face. I'd encourage my colleagues to oppose the amendment, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Anyone else seeking recognition? Representative Sell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am really concerned about the no score provided for many of the Democrat amendments in this matrix. And I want to remind people, the CBO is biased toward the more progressive bills. Obamacare was supposed to result in a $613 billion reduction in deficits. It cost us $1.5 trillion over time. Then you go to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. CBO estimated a $1.4 trillion increase in deficits. We've actually had a 4% revenues up in the 2 years following. So I yield back. I'm really concerned about no CBO scores provided in the Democrat amendments as a whole, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any other one seeking recognition? Seeing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Takano amendment to amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 7683. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of chair, the noes have it. A recorded vote has been requested. A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. This vote will be postponed. I now recognize Representative Ramirez to offer an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute on HR 7683.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you just mentioned, I have an amendment to the amendment, the nature of a substitute at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Ramirez
I
amendment.
ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with, and without objection, so ordered. The gentle lady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it's been 15 months since Secretary Collins was sworn in, and we're still receiving daily outreach from veterans and VA employees from across the country about how the staffing is impacting veterans, or lack of, is impacting veterans' ability to receive care. Over those months, and even before his appointment, members of this committee have repeatedly requested data from the VA regarding staff attrition so that we can get a full picture of the staffing challenges the facilities are facing, especially as veterans begin feeling the impacts of the deferred resignation program. Those requests, however, have related to our oversight responsibilities, but they've been unacceptably ignored. Case in point, last August, many of my fellow Democratic members sent letters to the Secretary asking about workforce data and what the Secretary likes to call natural attrition. But let me be clear, there is nothing natural about his intimidation, disrespect, and harassment of the VA's workforce. And as of today, only one member, just one member, has received even a partial response. It's my colleague, Representative Tim Kennedy, and the information he did in fact receive was pretty damning. Despite the Secretary's assertions that those within mission-critical or direct patient care roles were not allowed to take deferred resignation, the data from Western New York shows differently. Per the partial data we received, at least 2 nurses were able to take DRP. And thanks to another data set that we received from the VA, we also know that the VA cut both of these positions during the call last December, where the VA wiped 26,000 long-standing vacancies from the books. You see, mission-critical roles have been jeopardized. So when the Secretary says these cuts won't delay or harm veteran care, the data from his own department is proving that we should not believe him. So this amendment requires the Secretary to share attrition DRP data disaggregated by facility and occupation. And I think it's really important for the VA to give this information for us, and we've been demanding it for nearly a year. And that's why I've introduced this amendment, because I think it's time we assert our Article 1 authority and require answers. With that, I hope that my colleagues will join me in supporting this amendment. And Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. I oppose the amendment because it is not relevant to the bill being considered. Staff reports on staff who are no longer at VA have nothing to do with the establishment of a budget office with the VA. I recommend my colleague vote no on the amendment. My colleagues vote no on the amendment because it is a distraction from the accountability this committee needs from the VA's fiscal management. After the shortfall debacle during the Biden administration, I would hope that the Democrat colleagues would support this fiscal responsibility that our veterans and taxpayers deserve. If Representative Ramirez is interested in this information, I'm happy to write a joint letter with her to get the information, as I am sure we would all agree that is likely faster that way than it is by getting putting in information or putting in and passing a law. With that, I could call on all my colleagues to vote no. I urge my colleagues to vote no with me on this amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? General Berkman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to oppose this amendment as well. This bill is about financial management structure at the VA. I repeat, financial management structure at the VA. This amendment would require a report on every employee who's separated from the department since January 1st of 2025. That has nothing to do with what this bill does. It's not relevant. And if my colleague wants to pursue this reporting requirement, it should be done through its own legislation, not tacked onto this bill. I'd encourage my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Does anyone else wish to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Ramirez amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute on HR 7683. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. No.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like a recorded vote.
The noes have it, and a recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. This vote will be postponed. I now call. Wait. Okay. Are there any further amendments in the nature of a substitute to HR 7683? Hearing none, we now move to the next bill because votes will be pending on that bill. Now we can go here. I now call up committee print for HR 6993, the Bacon Act of 2020. The Beacon Act, not Bacon. That would be a member of our, but it's not here today. Or for breakfast. Beacon Act of 2026. The clerk shall report the bill.
HR 6993 to
The
direct.
bill was circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules and without objection. The first reading is dispensed with. The bill is now open for amendments at any point. I now recognize General Berkman to speak on his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since 2000, hundreds of thousands of veterans have sustained a traumatic brain injury. And for too many, the effects don't subside, affecting mental health, daily functioning, and long-term recovery. The consequences are devastating. The VA's own 2025 National Veteran Suicide Prevention Report found that veterans with TBI diagnoses have a suicide rate of 77.6 per 100,000. That's 77 per 100,000 people, a sobering reminder of what's at stake. We know effective care is possible. The National Intrepid Center of Excellence at Walter Reed has already demonstrated significant improvements in PTSD, depression, anxiety, sleep dysfunction, and behavioral outcomes through interdisciplinary intensive outpatient care, precisely the kind of care the Beacon Act seeks to make more widely available to our veterans. But demand for this care among our veterans is outpacing capacity. The Beacon Act closes that gap by supporting, not supplanting, what VA is already doing. It creates 2 targeted, time-limited grant programs that fund clinical evaluation of neurorehabilitation treatments and independent research to identify what works and what warrants broader VA adoption. Funded approaches must go through randomized, controlled trials, rigorous outcome measurement, and regular reporting, and both programs sunset after 3 years. This is a responsible investment in building the evidence-based VA needs to better serve veterans living with the lasting effects of TBI. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and I support the bill. I fully support the intent of my friend General Berkman's bill to address the issue of traumatic brain injury in an efficient, community-focused way. The Beacon Act would create 2 targeted grant programs focused on supporting academic institutions and community organizations to research innovative treatments for brain health. Addressing the issue of TBI is a top priority for House Republicans, and I'm sure it is for the House Democrats as well. This good bipartisan bill would continue expanding the reach of VA's brain injury treatment efforts and help ensure veterans can access care that works best for them. I want to thank the work done by the minority and their efforts toward our community goal of helping veterans and making this an even better bill. These shared efforts are meant to supplement, not supplant, the department's work. It is our responsibility to get better answers for veterans living with the lasting effects of TBI. This bill would help us do that. I want to thank General Berkman for his strong bipartisan work on this issue on behalf of the veterans. It would reach, and I urge the members to support it. Does any member wish to comment on the bill? The ranking member.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must oppose the Beacon Act in its current form. I appreciate that we're discussing the importance of expanding research and improving treatment for mild traumatic brain injury, or MTBI, in veterans. I've heard from far too many veterans who experience with MTBI has impacted every part of their physical and mental health. It is clear that we need to do more, and I stand ready to work with my colleagues to give VA the resources it needs to do this work. However, since the start of this year, my Democratic colleagues on the House Subcommittee have raised numerous concerns about the Beacon Act. In subcommittee hearings and during last month's Health Subcommittee markup, both we have raised these concerns. They have not been addressed. Even VA shared a number of concerns with this legislation in its testimony in January that have not been addressed. Several of my colleagues and I will address our most significant outstanding concerns with amendments in a few moments. However, I would like to briefly highlight a couple of my biggest concerns with the legislation. First, I'm very concerned that this bill includes provisions that could require VA to use existing funds appropriated for PTSD research and general mental health services to fund these grant programs if sufficient funds are not otherwise appropriated. Now, given that VA has consistently been asked to do more with less over the last 18 months, I struggle to imagine a world in which VA will not be required to divert this funding for new grant programs that this bill requires. We cannot fund new search, that this bill creates, not just requires. We cannot fund new research on the backs of veterans already receiving care at VA. And I cannot support a bill that allows even that possibility. Second, this bill creates an inappropriate, and I would even venture to say potentially illegal structure for administering one of the grant programs it creates. I cannot support legislation that asks VA to contract with a third-party entity to perform inherently governmental responsibilities of allocating and overseeing the expenditure of grant funding. Third, this bill does not do enough to ensure that the grantees who receive funds to operate clinical trials are required to coordinate with VA about their findings. Finally, the bill does not do enough to ensure robust oversight of the grantees and the outcomes they create using funds from a VA grant program. Now, my colleagues and I will be offering what we believe are common sense amendments to address these outstanding concerns and ensure that Congress can conduct necessary oversight of the grant programs this bill creates. I urge my colleagues to accept these amendments to improve the bill and ensure that Democratic members' concerns are addressed. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition? Representative Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to enter two studies into the record from Frontiers in Neurology. One is the efficacy of interdisciplinary intensive outpatient program in treating combat-related traumatic brain injury and psychological health conditions,
Without objection.
and use of person-centered goals to direct interdisciplinary care for military service members and veterans with chronic MTBI with co-concurring psychological conditions.
Without objection.
Okay. As we learn more about the brain, and my colleague Morgan Luttrell is much more familiar with the subject than I am, we're understanding that the types of activities that take place in the United States military are causing TBI at a level that we'd never looked at before. We used to do rocket ranges, firing the Carl Gustav, and we got done and we'd go to lunch and couldn't do basic math. I mean, you get rocked hard. There's only 5 of these facilities in the entire country. And so what we need, including one in Milwaukee, what we need to do is expand these facilities. And is this a perfect bill? No. Is it a very good bill that's going to help get our veterans the treatment for the injuries that they sustained serving our nation? The answer is yes. And I'm always going to err on the side of yes when it comes to treating our veterans for service-connected injuries. So I strongly urge my colleagues to support this on both sides of the aisle, because I know that my Democrat colleagues also want to make sure that our veterans get care. And this is a way to demonstrate that we really mean what we say. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Anyone else speak on the base text? Are there any amendments to the committee print of H.R. 6993? I recognize Representative Morrison to offer an amendment to the committee print on H.R. 6993.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to HR
I
6993.
ask unanimous consent. The further reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment may look familiar to the Health Subcommittee members, as I offered it when this bill was considered at a subcommittee markup. I believe the purpose of my amendment addresses an issue that warrants the attention and review of the full committee. My amendment would strengthen oversight requirements throughout the bill. VA and Congress need to be able to perform robust oversight of the grant program to protect VA's investment in mild TBI research. I appreciate that there was some effort to strengthen the oversight and reporting requirements in the bill when it was marked up by the subcommittee. However, I believe the need for additional measures in this bill remains. To ensure that the committee can carry out oversight of these 2 new grant programs, the language in this bill needs to be enforceable, effective, and rooted in evidence-based science. This is especially true when establishing expectations for reporting adverse events related to any clinical trials or care provided outside of VA to veterans. My amendment makes it clear that grantees must track adverse events and report them to VA rather than only doing so if the grantee chooses to collect that data. It also requires grantees to report on any relevant follow-up care provided to ensure that veterans who face adverse events receive proper support. My amendment would also ensure that grantees use accepted clinical standards to evaluate the outcomes of their research, and ensures VA also considers the cessation of the grant program as part of its annual review if it is demonstrated that the program is not working as intended or delivering on VA's investment. Finally, my amendment also expands the reporting requirements in the bill to ensure Congress and VA receive all the information necessary to evaluate whether the grant program is an effective use of VA resources. I hope my colleagues recognize and agree with my amendment's purpose to further strengthen oversight and transparency for these grant programs with a clear focus on delivering for veterans. Passing this amendment will help ensure that this external research is conducted following the same principles that VA research has successfully pursued for decades. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor of this amendment and recognize the value of due diligence when it comes to oversight of taxpayer dollars. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. The amendment to the committee print of HR 6993 would do nothing but add more layers of unnecessary reporting to the bill. Our staff has worked with researchers, stakeholders, clinical professionals to get this good bill to where it is now. It was not an idea born overnight. I do not believe that the amendment is necessary to accomplish the goals of the Beacon Act. Further, I don't believe this amendment was offered in good faith. Therefore, I oppose the amendment. I urge my colleagues to vote no with me on the amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? General Berkman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I appreciate my colleagues' interest in the bill, I have to oppose this amendment, and I will be direct about why. The amendment would impose accepted clinical standards language throughout the bill in a field where no universally accepted standard of care for chronic mild TBI currently exists. You can't get there from here. This is not an oversight in the legislation. It's the reason the legislation exists. Veterans with chronic mild TBI are suffering because too many have spent years in fragmented systems, siloed care, short appointments, and disconnected treatment plans that fail to address the full complexity of their conditions. Requiring accepted clinical standards in this context gives entrenched institutions a mechanism to dismiss innovative approaches simply because they're innovative, not because the evidence doesn't support them. Further, it weakens the bill's focus on long-term recovery, adds unnecessary reporting burdens, and introduces cessation language that frames a program we haven't even started around shutting it down. The bill is designed to build the evidence base that will define the future standard of care. Conversely, this amendment would let the absence of that standard be used against the very effort to establish it. I'd encourage my colleagues to oppose the amendment, and I yield back.
Does any other member seek recognition? Seeing none. The question now occurs on agreeing to the Morrison amendment in the committee print for HR 6993. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not.
Mr. Chair, I request a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. The vote will be postponed. I now recognize Ranking Member Takano to offer an amendment to the committee print for HR 6993.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment to HR 6993 at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to HR 6993.
I ask unanimous consent for the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment requires grantees to share with VA all clinical data from the clinical trials funded under this bill. I believe it is important to ensure that VA researchers and clinicians can also access the data generated by this research. This will enable us to ensure coordination of efforts as well as transparency into the reported outcomes of grantees' research. I acknowledge that many nonprofit organizations and academic affiliates have helped VA make huge strides in areas of research critical to veterans' health. However, Congress and VA have spent more than 100 years investing in and strengthening VA's research ecosystem. VA's research track record of discovery speaks for itself. Any research to improve treatment for mild TBI must include coordination with VA, including shared clinical data that could allow VA's world-class research ecosystem to develop the next breakthrough. Now, I must point out that some of the very same organizations that have been vocal proponents of this legislation have a track record of not being fully transparent with their research data. Let me repeat that. I must point out that some of the very same organizations that have been vocal proponents of this legislation have a track record of not being fully transparent with their research data. For example, in 2024, researchers from the Boulder Crest Foundation, a nonprofit organization focused on offering complementary and alternative interventions to veterans like yoga, mindfulness, and equine therapy, published an 18-month longitudinal study about the effects of its programming on improving post-traumatic stress symptoms. This $1 million privately funded study could have been massively helpful in informing VA and other entities about new ways to treat veterans. Unfortunately, the published findings reflected outcomes for only a fraction of the overall number of veterans who participated in Boulder Crest's programs, without explanation of why some were included while others were excluded. This unfortunate lack of transparency undermines the usefulness of Boulder Crest's findings and the ability to apply them to the broader veteran population. If we're using public funds to conduct research outside VA, we must ensure Congress and VA can evaluate the return on the taxpayer's investment, validate findings, and build on the clinical data created with taxpayer funds. I understand this legislation is intended to drive innovative treatments for mild TBI in veterans. I certainly agree with the need for additional research, since, as we know, mild TBI is one of the most common wartime injuries. However, I'm concerned that if we're not careful, efforts such as this one will only increase fragmentation of research and treatment for veterans. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member. I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. The Beacon Act would create new grant programs at VA which would fund innovative treatments and research to improve the health outcomes for veterans suffering with chronic mild TBI. I oppose the Ranking Member's amendment because although it may be well-intended, it is unnecessary. This amendment would add duplicative reporting requirements that are already included in the base text. Not only does this address a problem that does not exist, but it would create new ones. This would slow down the good work meant to be accomplished by the program. I urge my colleagues to oppose the Ranking Member's amendment, and I urge my colleagues to vote no with me on the amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? Representative Luttrell,
Thank
you're
you, Mr.
recognized.
Takano. Do you have, on the Boulder Crest study that you mentioned just then, are you aware of what the inclusion criteria was for the specific numbers that they provided in that report? Like, for instance, if 1,000 veterans go to Boulder Crest that year, but the study was focused on 18 to 21-year-old males, and that was the study they produced, will that hold water?
So, Mr. Luttrell, I wish I could tell you but we can't because they didn't publish the study.
No, but the specific study would have said that.
They didn't, the study, it would say that, I would hope it would say that, but the study has not been published. That's one of our.
I got you. I don't need that to turn into a conversation on the other side.
So anyway, just the inclusion and exclusionary criteria that you're referring to, those weren't published.
They would have had to have been for the study if we funded it.
One would think so, but I'm telling you that they were not published. That is kind of the substance of our objection.
I tell you what, I'll catch the young lady offline to have that conversation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone else seek recognition? Seeing none. The question now occurs on agreeing to the Takano amendment to committee printed for HR 6993. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. No. In the opinion of chair, the noes have it.
I request a quarter vote.
A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. This vote will be postponed. I now recognize Representative Brownlee offering amendment to the committee print on HR 6993.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to
I
HR.
ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment is dispensed with and without objection so ordered. The young lady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment, which I also offered at the Health Subcommittee markup where we considered this bill, strikes provisions in the legislation that direct VA to pay for the two grant programs using the existing budgets of VA's National Center for PTSD and VA Mental Health Services if Congress doesn't appropriate specific funds for the two grant programs. My amendment was unfortunately rejected at the subcommittee markup. However, as I have explained at several previous hearings, I feel strongly that we cannot risk siphoning money from VA direct care and research to pay for this pilot program. Creating a new pilot program is not a cost-free undertaking for VA. If this bill becomes law, the department will be required to administer not one, but two grant programs, even in the absence of appropriated funding. Given that we are an authorizing committee and not an appropriating committee, we unfortunately have no direct control over whether sufficient funds will be appropriated to allow VA to carry out these grant programs. In the unfortunate event that sufficient funding is not appropriated for these two grant programs, I worry this bill leaves VA no choice but to divert funding from the National Center for PTSD and Veterans Mental Health Services to carry out these grant programs. I support investing in new research, but we must ensure we are pursuing these investments in a responsible manner that protects resources for existing VA research and clinical services. I can't recall ever seeing provisions like this in any other legislation we have advanced during my time on this committee, and I don't think we should set that precedent now. I'd also note that General Bergman's Milcon VA amendment that draws attention to the importance of VA's research on, quote, on areas benefiting veterans such as oncology, traumatic brain injury care, psychedelic therapies, and assistive devices was made in order, although it does not provide any additional funding for such research. In any case, I'm glad Mr. Bergman agrees with me that VA research is critical, and I hope he'll support my amendment to ensure that there is no risk that existing VA research funding will be diverted to administer this grant program. I'd also note that the legislation as amended at the subcommittee not only includes language authorizing appropriations, but it also includes provisions to extend the authority to collect VA home loan fees to ensure that the cost of this legislation is covered. Given that this legislation provided an offset, to its costs, provisions that direct VA to use its existing funding should no longer be necessary. Removing these provisions will remove all risks of or uncertainty that existing VA funds would be diverted to these programs. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment to protect VA's existing funding for mental health services and PTSD research, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I recognize myself now in opposition to the amendment. I do not support the intent of the Representative Brownlee amendment to tie the Secretary's hands when it comes to expanding mental health support. The flexibility to use the funds the Beacon Act would authorize was made so that these grants could stand up quickly, responsibly, and without delay. I believe this amendment would go against the intent of General Berkman's bill and create funding uncertainty that could slow down the implementation of this new program. Veterans in crisis should not have to wait any longer for more support options. The goal of the Beacon Act is to create new solutions, expand the reach of VA's mental health services even further. For these reasons, I oppose the amendment, and I urge my colleagues to vote no with me on the amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? General Berkman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I appreciate my colleague's concern, I have to oppose this amendment. As we noted, or as was noted during the subcommittee markup, nothing in the bill requires the VA to redirect existing funds. It simply gives the department flexibility to use available resources in the absence of a direct appropriation, while explicitly requiring that any such use supplement, not supplant, existing programs. Removing that flexibility doesn't improve oversight. It just makes it easier for the department to delay or avoid implementation. Veterans living with chronic mild TBI, PTSD, and chronic pain, the very populations that VA's own data identifies as the highest risk for suicide, cannot afford more delays. These grant programs were designed specifically to address those overlapping conditions, and adding funding barriers slows access to care for veterans already in crisis. The bill already has strong safeguards, reporting requirements, and oversight mechanisms. This amendment adds nothing but another hurdle to care delivery. At a time when we are working to expand treatment options, support research, and improve outcomes for veterans with mild TBI, and we should be focused on enabling progress, not limiting it. I encourage my colleagues to oppose the amendment, and I yield back.
Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? Seeing none. The question now occurs on agreeing to the Brownlee Amendment, the committee print for HR 6993. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. She's going to get to the button. This vote will be postponed. Without never mind, we'll move on. I now recognize Representative Dexter to offer, Dr. Dexter to offer an amendment to the committee print on HR 6993.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment to HR 6993.
The clerk should
at the
report
desk.
the amendment.
Amendment to HR 6993, Subcommittee Print, offered by Ms.
I
Dexter.
ask unanimous consent that further reading of amendment is dispensed with and without objection, so ordered. The gentlelady is now recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am offering an amendment to strike Section 3 of the Beacon Act. This section establishes a grant program to carry out studies and applied programs on approaches and methodologies for the treatment of mild TBI in veterans. That language is exceedingly broad. Given the critical importance of VA research funding, I am concerned this lack of specificity could divert precious research resources away from VA's ability to conduct world-class research. I fully recognize the need to continue research on behalf of our veterans. However, this provision would make those investments at the expense of operations at the VA's National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. We should not allow our urgency on this issue or any issue to come at the cost of longstanding, proven VA research programs. Equally concerning is the directive that VA, quote, seek to enter into an agreement with an independent organization, end quote, to administer the grant program and carry out the studies and related efforts. In its testimony on this bill, VA states, quote, grant administration involves soliciting applications, reviewing and scoring these applications, and monitoring the use of those funds. In particular, the scoring and awarding of funds are inherently governmental functions that should not be performed by a non-governmental entity. I agree with this assessment. It is inappropriate for a non-governmental entity to administer a federal grant program and make decisions about the allocation of taxpayer dollars. Outsourcing administration of this program would weaken accountability and limit our ability to ensure funds are directed toward the highest value research for our veterans. We have a limited set of resources, and we cannot afford to inefficiently or ineffectively disperse those limited resources. In this committee, we should be singularly focused on structuring VA research to ensure it delivers the strongest possible outcomes for those who have served. As a physician, I strongly support advancing medical research, but I cannot, in good conscience, support moving this bill forward without addressing the serious flaws in this section. I'm more than willing to work with my colleagues on the other side of this aisle to drive accountable outcomes-based investments in research, but this section needs to be fundamentally restructured to achieve that goal, which is why this amendment strikes the language in its entirety. I urge my colleagues to support the amendment and hope we can find a path forward to continue to support world-class research at the VA. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. I oppose the amendment from Dr. Dexter. This amendment would strike large sections of the new program before it can even begin. which would limit VA's ability to ensure independent research is effective for the veterans it would serve. This amendment would not also strip all the accountability measures that are currently built in. Frankly, this is silly and goes against the intent of the legislation and the program. For this reason, I oppose the amendment. I urge my colleagues to vote no with me on the amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? Seeing none, the question occurs on agreeing to the Dexter amendment to the committee printed on HR 6993. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion, Chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Chair, I
A
request-
recorded vote has been requested, and pursuant to committee rules, the vote will be postponed. Are there any further amendments to the committee print for HR 6993? Hearing none, we will move to the next bill. I now call up committee print for HR 6444, the Blast Overpressured Research Mitigation Task Force Act. The clerk shall report the bill.
HR 6444, to direct the
The text
Secretary.
was circulated in advance pursuant to the rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendments at any point. I recognize myself in support of the bill. HR 644, I want to make sure I get all the fours, 6444, the Blast Overpressure Research Mitigation Task Force Act, introduced by Representative Ronnie Jackson of Texas, would create a task force dedicated to studying the impacts of blast overpressure exposure injuries and treatments in service members and veterans. Brain injuries can be difficult to diagnose, which means that we must ensure VA keeps moving forward on this issue and has all the tools at their disposal to effectively get veterans living with TBI the care and support they need. A recent hearing on TBI, we heard that veterans who have been deployed over the last 20 years about how the right care, whether inside or outside VA, gave them their lives back. But under current law, VA relies heavily on internal data to treat these injuries. And without partnership with outside groups such as research and data, this bill would open the door to is much more difficult to identify the gaps in treatment within the system. This bill would address the issue of blast exposure head-on by strengthening oversight, accountability, and better data practices. In return, veterans would receive increased quality of care to treat the invisible wounds of service, including PTSD and other related injuries due to blast overpressure exposure. The bipartisan bill would also ensure VA and DOW continue to work together on injuries affecting service members and veterans. I urge your support for HR 6444, and I yield back. Are there any other amendments to the committee print of HR? Does anyone have a comment on the amendment? Seeing none. Are there any amendments to the committee print for HR 644? I now recognize Ranking Member Takano for amendment to the committee print on HR 644.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to HR 6444 at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to HR.
Passed unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment is dispensed with and without objection. So ordered, the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, as I'm sure you and your fellow veterans know all too well, military service comes with risks and hazards that extend far beyond incoming fire. Occupational hazards and exposures like jet fuel and PFAS, orthopedic injuries to backs and knees, hearing loss. These things are all too common. But one hazard that is also very common but commonly overlooked is the risk from outgoing fire in the form of blast overpressure. Those in combat arms occupations and our military train, those in combat arms occupations in our military train relentlessly to become the most lethal fighting force on the planet. That training involves repetition and firing thousands of rounds from weapons of all sizes. That's not even to speak of the rounds fired toward an enemy in actual combat operations. But every single one of those rounds represents a contained explosion happening in very close proximity to our service members. Mr. Chairman, unless and until we're able to engineer ourselves a way around the laws of physics, the blast waves from those explosions hit our service members with full force. Now, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that this blast pressure affects the brain, lungs, ears, and other body systems. And while the effect may be small or even imperceptible at first, it is cumulative. Over time, sometimes even long after a service member has become a veteran, problems arise. Hearing impairment, cognitive impairment, migraines, and even problems like dementia or Alzheimer's can manifest from repeated exposure to blast overpressure. Now, there is a tremendous amount of research into this issue at VA, the Department of Defense, and other federal partners, and in the academic world as well. And that research needs to be encouraged and even expanded. So I support Representative Jackson's bill to create a task force to coordinate these efforts. But it is imperative for those veterans that are suffering now and those that will in the future that VA walk and chew gum at the same time. Now, as one of our colleagues said at a previous hearing, we need to work on legislation that moves the needle for veterans who are in need of help now. That is why I have introduced this amendment to require VA begin the process of developing a presumption of service connection for blast overpressure so that all that coordinated research leads to something concrete. There is already a robust body of evidence to support blast overpressure as a presumptive. And I feel strongly that a presumption of service connection is warranted in this case. But I recognize that there is value in a full and robust evaluation process at VA. And that's why my amendment does not create the presumption directly, which again is my preferred path. But rather, this amendment simply instructs VA to use the process established by the PACT Act to consider it. So, Mr. Chairman, these blast overpressures are not a matter of happenstance during a service member's enlistment. They are an occupational requirement necessary to the operational readiness of our military. It is part of the job we ask them to do for us. And I believe there is a causal connection that exists between certain military job specialties exposed to occupational blasts and negative brain effects suffered by veterans. And these conditions are deserving of action by VA. So I encourage you and all my colleagues to support this amendment and begin the process of getting those impacted by blast overpressure the care and benefits they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. The bill is focusing on advancing treatment for brain research for veterans suffering from exposure to blast overpressure. I oppose the amendment because I believe it would move the focus of this good legislation away from the treatment and research and into an entirely separate issue of disability benefits and presumption of service connection. This bill is not about compensation policy. It's about getting right the medical research so that the veterans can access advanced brain health science and improve rehab care. To put it simply, the amendment is like trying to play soccer on a baseball field. I would also note that VA already recognizes traumatic brain injury and veterans can do and receive services connected to disability for TBI today. VA is actively working to improve how these claims are evaluated and processed in the disability benefit area. For those reasons, I urge opposition to the amendment. I urge my colleagues to vote no with me on the amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? Seeing none. The question occurs on the agreeing to the Takano amendment to the committee print for HR 6444. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. The amendment is not agreed. A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. The vote will be postponed. Are there any further amendments? Hearing none, we will move to the next bill. I now, excuse me, I now call up committee print for HR 7950, the VA Congressional Accountability Act. The clerk shall report the bill.
HR 7950, to amend
The
Title
text was
38.
circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with. The bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Representative Self for the purposes of offering an amendment to the nature of a substitute.
Mr. Chairman, I have an ANS at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment in the nature of substitute.
Amendment in the nature of a
Ask
substitute.
unanimous consent, further reading of the amendment in the nature of substitute is dispensed with, and I ask that it be considered as base text for the purpose of this markup. Without objection, so ordered. I now recognize Representative Self for 5 minutes to speak in support of the amendment in the nature of substitute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am speaking on behalf of my bill, HR 7950, the VA Congressional Accountability Act. This bill is about ensuring that Congress can properly serve the men and women who served our country. The Department of Veterans Affairs is one of the largest federal agencies in government. It administers hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars and oversees programs that directly impact the health care, benefit, and livelihood of millions of veterans and their families. However, Congress cannot effectively conduct oversight of that mission if it is unable to receive timely, accurate, complete information from the department. There have been too many instances where responses to congressional inquiries from the VA have been delayed or incomplete. Members on both sides of the aisle have experienced situations where requests for information lingered for months without clear timelines or meaningful updates. That is not acceptable for an agency charged with serving our nation's veterans, and it undermines Congress' constitutional oversight responsibilities. My bill establishes formal and clear standards for how the VA communicates with Congress. It requires prompt acknowledgement of requests, production plans, with estimated delivery dates and firm timelines for compliance. It also creates accountability measures when those deadlines are not met. This bill is not about politics or Republicans and Democrats scoring points against one another. Every member of Congress represents veterans. Every congressional office handles constituent cases involving delayed benefits, medical care, claims processing, or accountability concerns at the VA. When Congress receives timely and accurate information, we're better equipped to resolve problems for veterans regardless of party affiliation. This bill benefits both sides of the political aisle. Oversight should never be partisan. Transparency should never be partisan. Accountability to our veterans should never be partisan. No matter what party controls Congress, the principle remains that federal agencies must respond to the elected representatives of the American people in a timely and complete manner. Veterans deserve a VA that is responsive not only to this committee, but to Congress as a whole. I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself in support of the amendment. This bill would bring long overdue accountability to VA by submitting the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs and setting clear deadlines for when the agency must respond to Congress with necessary information to fill our Article I authority. I support the good government proposal that would benefit veterans and the constituent services to veterans across the country. Do any members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 7950? Ranking member, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll be the first to admit that I'm extremely frustrated with the substance of and the rate at which we receive information, briefings, and testimony from VA. For example, we had an oversight hearing yesterday regarding the West LA VA campus. VA's testimony was almost a day late and was only a measly 2.5 pages long. Documents that my staff have been requesting for 10 months were received at 5:30 p.m. the night before the hearing. Casework we've been attempting to do for veterans since last August has gone unanswered. So trust me, I would greatly appreciate reforms to this office and the process in which our requests are handled and approved by OCLA and Secretary Collins. However, we cannot just throw away our oversight process here in pursuit of sticking it to VA. To reform OCLA correctly, we need to take a close look at the approval processes and the bottlenecks across the VA enterprise that are leading to the delay in getting us the information that we asked for. So I fear this bill will unnecessarily punish career employees of OCLA for the failures of VA political leadership to not approve or provide information that is responsive to congressional requests in a timely manner. This in no way will result in us getting quicker or quality responses to our inquiries. In fact, it will likely result in the opposite, as even more career OCLA employees head to the exits. Finally, somewhat ironically, VA was not provided text of this bill until 7 business days ago, before the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee considered it in a legislative hearing. So VA was unable to provide views on the bill. Without any feedback from the department on the text, I do not think it is wise to advance this legislation. So I want to receive the information we asked for from VA in a timelier manner than we are receiving it under Secretary Collins, but we should still do our due diligence and exercise necessary oversight before committing to legislative options. Thank you, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute?
Actually, yes.
I think so. I think I did
Yes,
it right here.
yes.
Yes, you did.
I have
now
an amendment-
recognize Ranking Member Takano to offer an amendment.
I have an amendment to the amendment in the nature of substitute to HR 7950 at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment, the
I
nature.
ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and without objection, so ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment would require the department to share information with both sides of the aisle when requests are made to VA in the form of a chairman's letter. I want to say from the outset that I think VA's demand for chairman's letters in order to obtain information is often used as a delaying tactic, and we should address that too. However, when they are used, we have a general practice in this committee, a norm, if you will, if I could say that, a norm in this committee of copying the other side on those requests. So when you are in the majority and you're writing the chairman's letter and you copy me, that's what I'm talking about. I've done that in the past when I've been the chairman. We have a general practice on the committee of copying the other side on those requests, with the exception that VA will then provide information to both majority and minority. This has been the practice for a long time. However, I think there have been some changes to this practice over the last year and a half that are very concerning, and I believe are diminishing my ability to do oversight. So let me explain, let me provide an example. So here on this poster, actually, we have both posters. Yeah, this poster. Yes. So here, it is your name. You are the chairman, yes. Here on post number 1, we have a letter from the current majority to the Biden administration. So that was signed by you. And just look at the length of that letter. It was sent in 2024. It's 4 pages long, and it details clearly what the majority is interested in receiving from the department, including a specific list of items, including documents. Now, this letter, on post number 2, let's look at one of the letters that the majority recently sent to the Trump administration. I'm copied at the bottom, the Honorable Mark Takano, but I have no idea what this letter is about. I mean, I have a lot of information here about what this letter is about. It's very detailed and it's very explicit. But here, it is a request for this code number, this file or this document, and it directs the department not to send a formal written request, but rather provide something to the majority staff. Now, I can guess at the purpose of using this form letter process, but I think it is problematic to say that we need to reform OCLA when we also need to examine how we're doing our own work. Letters similar to these have been going out on a weekly basis. I recently asked staff to get information from VA related to the tragic shooting of several children and family members by a veteran in Louisiana. VA responded that a chairman's letter had been sent and that I was copied on the letter, so my staff would not be getting the information that we requested. Instead, we get a letter back, a copy. Our copy is this little code. So I'm presuming the majority is having some way to get this information in much fuller, more detailed form. Now, we were told that we would not be getting the information we requested, as the department was already providing something to the majority. We don't know whether the VA has transmitted anything to the majority, but if so, we have yet to receive it. Now, this is absolutely unacceptable on many levels. Whatever this letter system is, it is impeding oversight, and whatever OCLA is doing, it's impeding oversight. Something needs to change. And if I have to attempt to make that change through the legislative process, then I will. And let me just say, I hope that we can agree that the norm that we observed, that when we copy each other on a chairman's letter, we expect both majority and minority to get the information from the department. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, and before I just want to say, could you pick a different letter? That signature of mine is terrible there. I recognize myself in support of the amendment.
I might just throw it up in the air with all.
It was so important. You don't realize I'm in support of the amendment. It has been a longstanding custom of this committee that when the chairman sends a letter, the minority is copied and receives the information provided with response. If that is not happening, then let us know, because this is not the way the committee should operate. I do have some reservations about handcuffing the description of future chairs of this committee. Each Congress is different, and the chair must have the ability to manage oversight appropriately. But transparency should be a partisan issue, a nonpartisan issue. You know which way I meant it. Yeah. And as a sign of good faith, I'm willing to support the ranking member's amendment to ensure that we are working together toward transparency and accountability. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? Mr. Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask the ranking member for a clarification. You put in an amendment that we are going to support, and yet you spoke against the underlying bill. Do you intend to now support the underlying bill with your approved amendment?
Mr. Self, the acceptance of the amendment still is not sufficient for us to give support to the overall amendment. The other objection is really not answered regarding the treatment of career civil, the career employees of OCLA. We actually think that the cause of the delays is happening because of the political appointees and the way in which everything has to be reviewed by the Office of the Secretary. That's the fundamental problem. We don't think your bill actually solves this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone
I
else
yield back.
seeking recognition? Seeing none. The question now occurs on the agreeing to the Takano amendment, the amendment in the nature of substitute to HR 7950. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Without, no, I didn't think you did. Okay, without objection, the motion to reconsider laid on the table. How about that? I now recognize Representative Ramirez to offer an amendment number 5 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute on HR 7950.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, I have an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk.
The clerk shall report the amendment.
Ramirez, number 5, amendment to the
I ask
amendment.
unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and without objection so ordered. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. I think in just the previous conversation we just had in the previous amendment, everyone in this room is pretty clear that the timeliness of responses to congressional inquiries and casework is a serious issue. We've talked about it on both sides of the aisle. But I think to just follow up on what the ranking member mentioned a moment ago, how we diagnose that problem matters for how we pursue a solution. And I think many of us are aware that the challenges of the OCLA employees, like many employees at VA, they operate under specific guidance. I'll tell you, they are often the pass-through of information. They're facilitating responses from business lines and program offices, and they may not be able to control response times from these offices, nor are they able to dictate review timelines from the secretary himself, because Secretary Collins has changed the policy from previous administrations, and now he wants to review absolutely everything that goes to Congress himself personally. So I want to walk us through what that actually looks like. My staff receive a concern from a veteran or a VA employee that we feel we need to get more information about it. So what do my staff do? They submit a request for information with the OCLA. Then the OCLA then sends the questions out to the program office. Then the program office collects the responses from the subject matter experts. And then the subject matter experts then get that approved, and then they send it back to OCLA. Historically, those responses would have been reviewed by OCLA and then actually transmitted to congressional members and staff. However, there's a big however now. Under this administration and Secretary Collins' leadership, those responses don't go to us. They then go up to the Secretary's office to be approved in whatever time frame the Secretary feels like he's going to follow. Now, what changes at VA, particularly in the majority, show some clear commitment to privatization, we can really be clear here that the problem we have here with OCLA is a problem at the feet of leadership. And look, I wholeheartedly agree with my majority colleagues that accountability must be taken for the delays in timely responses to Congress. Absolutely. It's actually why we're having this conversation now. But the thing is, receiving information months late or never in many cases significantly harms the work that we as legislators and authorizers can do for our nation's veterans. However, let's be clear, accountability must be directed appropriately. Ultimately, if the buck stops with Secretary Collins, then the buck should stop when Secretary Collins is not effectively doing his job. If the responses to the many congressional inquiries my colleagues and I submit must be approved by the 10th floor ultimately, then don't you think that the 10th floor should be held accountable when we are forced to wait for Collins to do the work he decided to insert himself into? My amendment would apply accountability where it's needed, tying the Secretary's salary to this text. If his salary is on the line, I believe we'd see much quicker response times from Secretary Collins, since now he has to approve every single thing that comes back to us. And I hope that in the spirit of bipartisanship, which we just saw 4 minutes ago, that you would consider joining me on this amendment as well. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. I oppose the amendment to the amendment for one very simple reason. The VA Secretary is a direct line of succession, and hampering his ability to travel should he need to respond to a developing health emergency is simply wrong. I am for accountability, but I am not okay with crippling the leader of the largest federal health system. I urge my colleagues to vote no with me on this amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? Seeing none. The question now occurs on agreeing to the Ramirez Amendment number 5 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute onto HR 7950. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. And
Mr. Chairman, I'd love a recorded vote on this.
a recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. This vote will be postponed. I now recognize Representative Ramirez to offer amendment number 4 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 7950.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the amendment in the
The
nature of a
clerk shall
substitute.
report the amendment.
Ramirez, number 4.
I ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment is dispensed with and without objection so ordered. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain her amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to be very hopeful and optimistic that this one might be the one that we can do bipartisanship on. Well, let me start by saying that I deeply appreciate Representative Self for bringing this bill forward today. I'm not confident that we as a committee completely understand where the choke points are in getting information to Congress and how they are within OCLA, in part because we have not had a hearing with Assistant Secretary Burgeon here to ask him about the process in his office. And look, I expect that every member of this committee has felt some level of frustration with the information that we've been able to get from OCLA office and Secretary Collins. And I know my staff and I have waited for up to 9 months for assistance with veteran casework requests. We've received partial documentation in response to oversight requests, and we've heard the familiar, we'll take that for the record and we'll get back to you. Well, I'm still waiting for them to get back to me. And I can assure you these delays, which raise concerns about oversight obstruction, never result in better care, never result in quicker benefits, or even more holistic services for our veterans. They actually just maintain the status quo. And the status quo is unacceptable. You and I both know our veterans deserve so much better. My amendment today would work to finally change that status quo and would require that the Assistant Secretary of the OCLA, Don Burgeon, to come before the committee. Nothing big, nothing radical about that. He can come and present. With him present, members on both sides of the aisle would be able to ask questions about the mechanics of why we're not getting the information we request. Without this hearing, we don't know where the bottlenecks may be occurring or who truly is involved in the process for approving responses, although I think we do, Secretary Collins. But I don't feel comfortable taking some of the steps that this bill takes, like suspending the pay for hardworking CROs for not meeting response deadlines, without actually having him here to be able to answer questions directly. Representative Self's bill attempts to address concerning trends that we have seen in the Office of the Congressional and Legislative Affairs, which have definitely been exacerbated by this administration. However, I gotta be honest, I'm hesitant to support such text until we're able to get to the root of some of the issues that we have been talking about in public hearing, which is why I wanna urge, I wanna compel, I wanna challenge, I wanna exhort in all the passionate ways that my colleagues support my amendment today. And with that, I yield back, Chairman.
The gentlelady yields back. I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. Gentlelady yields, hey, said it twice on there. I oppose the amendment because Congress should not legislate a quarterly hearing schedule for one office within the department. Oversight is the responsibility of this committee. We should not support an amendment that dictates how and when or what terms Congress must conduct its oversight agenda. The lack of responsiveness from the Office of Congressional and Legislative Affairs is a bipartisan concern. Members on both sides have experienced delays in incomplete answers, frustration getting basic information from the department. But this amendment is overkill. If we want real transparency and accountability, we should pass legislation that requires the department to respond to Congress in a timely and complete manner. What we do not need is a statutory requirement for quarterly performative theatrics that may do little to solve the underlying problem. For that reason, I oppose the amendment. Does any other member wish to comment on the amendment? Seeing none. The question is on agreeing to the Ramirez Amendment number 4 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 7950. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. And the opinion of the chair, the ayes have, the
Chairman?
noes have it.
Chairman, I'd like a recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested pursuant to committee rules. This vote will be postponed. Are there any further amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 7950? Hearing none, since there are votes pending, we will consider our next bill. I now call up committee print to HR 6698, the Board of Veterans Appeals Annual Report Transparency Act of 2025. The clerk shall report the bill.
HR 6698 to amend
The
Title
text was
30.
circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules without objection. The first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is now open for amendment at any point. I now recognize Representative Self to speak on his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak on my bill, HR 6698, the Board of Veterans Appeals Transparency Act. We're going to try again for transparency.
Yeah, your microphone's on.
How about that?
That's better.
There we go. Veterans who file an appeal with the Board of Veterans Appeals deserve to know what is happening with their cases, why delays occur, and why factors are contributing to remands and backlogs. Veterans and their families are too often left in the dark while waiting months or even years for answers. This legislation takes a step toward changing that, a step. This bill requires the board to identify the specific factors contributing to untimely decisions and remands, to publicly report the number and percentage of cases affected by each factor. This matters because transparency leads to better oversight, as we've just been discussing. Veteran service organizations, Congress, and most importantly, veterans will finally have clearer data showing where problems exist within the appeals process and where improvements are needed. My bill also requires the board to publish weekly docket activity information online. Veterans waiting on appeals should not have to guess whether progress is being made. Greater visibility into the process can help reduce confusion, restore confidence in the system. The federal government should be as transparent as possible with the American people. Taxpayers fund these agencies and programs, and they have every right to know how their taxpayer dollars are being spent and whether the system is operating effectively. Transparency is not a burden on government, it's a responsibility of the government. This bill does not create a new entitlement program or expand bureaucracy for its own sake. It focuses on better reporting, better information, better accountability. When agencies are required to explain delays and identify recurring problems, it creates pressure to improve performance and deliver results. Our veterans fulfilled their obligations to this country. They should not face unnecessary uncertainty when seeking the benefits and decisions they have earned. By shedding more light on the appeals process, this bill helps veterans better understand the status of their case while giving Congress stronger tools to conduct oversight and pursue reforms where needed. This is a practical and common sense measure that promotes transparency, accountability, and improved trust in government. I urge my colleagues to support it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself in support of the legislation. As you know, I championed the Appeals Modernization Act of 2017. My bill helped give veterans more options and faster decisions on their VA appeals. While the board has come a long way in improving appeals wait times, many veterans are left in the dark for months of every year waiting on a final decision. This bill would help shine a light on this process and require the board to identify factors that lead to the delay or remnant decisions. It would also require the board to publish the weekly list of docketed appeals under consideration. I support this common sense bill to build on the AMA and thank Representative Self for his work on this important issue. Does any other member wish to comment on HR 6698 as amended? Mr. Kennedy.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the amendment in the nature of the substitute.
We're not to the amendment yet, but I will call it shortly if that's all right. Are there any other members which comment on the base bill? Seeing none, are there any amendments to the HR 6698 as amended?
Mr. Chairman,
I now recognize Representative Kennedy for an amendment to the committee print on HR 6698.
I have an amendment to the amendment in the nature of a
The
substitute.
clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to
I
HR.
ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment would be dispensed with and without objection. So ordered. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Over the last year and a half, we've heard repeated attacks on unions and organized labor across the board, claiming that they weaken the VA, protect misconduct, or stand in the way of accountability. That could not be further from the truth. Collective bargaining agreements, or CBAs, give employees the ability to speak truth to power, raise serious workplace concerns without fear of retaliation, demand the resources needed to do their jobs effectively, and advocate for both workers and veterans when the system fails them. Earlier this year, the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, secured a major legal victory when a federal judge ordered the VA to restore its collective bargaining agreements for nearly 300,000 employees represented by the union. While it should have never required a federal judge threatening contempt to force compliance by this administration, I'm glad VA employees once again have access to the workplace protections and grievance process that they're legally entitled to. That restoration included important protections like requiring employees to be placed on a performance improvement plan before disciplinary action is taken. Despite that court order, this committee's oversight shows VA has still failed to fully restore related negotiated agreements, including memorandums of agreement and side letters that were in effect before March 2025. One example involves the Board of Veterans Appeals Attorneys. Before the VA terminated these agreements, AFGE had negotiated performance standards that establish realistic expectation for how many cases an attorney can thoroughly review in a day. But because the VA has not restored these performance standards, despite a federal judge telling them to do so, board attorneys are still being forced by BVA management to take on more and more cases in a day. That may make numbers on a spreadsheet look nice, but it also increases the likelihood of mistakes. And those mistakes impact real veterans waiting on benefits, health care, and decisions that impact their lives. My amendment is simple. It requires a VA to restore the agreements that had already been approved through the grievance process prior to March 2025, something the department should already be doing. This is about ensuring VA employees have the time, tools, and workplace protections necessary to properly serve veterans. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. I recognize myself in opposition to the amendment. This amendment would reinstate any formal or informal negotiated agreement between VA and any labor organization that was previously in effect on March 25th, 2025. I'm sure it is no surprise to anyone on this committee that I'm a strong supporter of unions. I myself was a union firefighter. However, I trust the Secretary to make the right decision for the agency he leads to ensure it and its employees benefits that benefit the Americans it serves. VA is already implementing the reinstatement of collective bargaining agreements following the court orders. I also understand the VA is working to appeal the decision by the district court. That's the legal process at work, and we should not let that play out without Congress's interference. I also believe it has been too difficult to discipline bad employees at the VA, many of whom had sweetheart deals under the Biden administration. Some of those agreements were not serving veterans or taxpayers. This amendment is not necessary and is a poison pill that would risk the passage of this important bill. I urge my colleagues to vote no with me on this amendment. Does any other member wish to be recognized on the amendment? Ranking member?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I wish to offer my strong support for the amendment offered by Rep. Kennedy, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. Mr. Chairman, we all know that there's a world of difference between the letter and the spirit of law. And on a nearly daily basis, we deal with agencies or offices that take liberty with their interpretation of congressional intent to do what they wish. Similarly, but sadly, it seems like agencies also do the same thing with the court orders. In this case, the Board of Veterans Appeals is purposely parsing words of a court order to avoid fully restoring the rights of employees in contradiction of a clear judicial mandate. When Secretary Collins took the reins at VA, he unilaterally and illegally canceled collective bargaining agreements with unions representing VA employees. Unsurprisingly, employees sued, and also unsurprisingly, they won, and rightfully so. Unfortunately, because of this administration's disdain for civil servants and the courts, VA dragged its feet in complying with the court order. And they only did so under threat of contempt. As if that weren't bad enough, BVA continues to circumvent the court order by refusing to implement agreements with the union that are appended to the CBA, things like MOUs that outline production quotas and other working conditions. It is a direct affront to the courts, a direct insult to the workforce, and a disservice to the veterans served by the board. Those veterans need and deserve attorneys at the board who have the space to be thorough, thoughtful, and accurate in their work. And no one is helped by BVA attorneys forced to rush through cases to meet arbitrary production goals. Mr. Kennedy's amendment is simple and straightforward. And it would require BVA to implement not just the CBA as ordered by the court, but also any other workplace agreements negotiated with their union, complying not just with the letter of the court order, but the spirit as well. Again, I strongly support this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition on the amendment? Seeing none, the question now occurs on agreeing to the Kennedy Amendment, to the committee print for HR 6698. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. In the independent chair, no. Independent chair, the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Any further amendments? Hearing none, I now recognize Representative Van Orton for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee favorably report HR 6698 as amended to the full House.
The question is on favorably reporting the bill HR 6698 as amended by the subcommittee to the full House. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, as the ayes have it, the motion is agreed to, and HR 698 as amended is reported favorably to the House.
Mr. Chairman. Okay.
Okay. In accordance with the committee rules, further proceedings on this matter will be postponed. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. A motion that is agreed to on HR is amended, reported favorably. Okay. Hold on. Got it. There's so many ways we could go with this.
Well,
The motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority, supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on HR 6698.
Without objection. I now call up committee print to HR 2283, the Recognizing Community Organizations for Veterans Engagement and Recovery Act. The clerk shall report the bill.
HR 2283.
Text was circulated in advance pursuant to committee's rules and without objection. The first reading is dispensed with. The bill is now open for the amendment at any point. I now recognize myself for the purposes of offering an amendment in the nature of substitute. The clerk shall report the amendment in the nature of substitute.
Amendment in the
I
nature.
ask unanimous consent that further reading of the amendment in the nature of substitute is dispensed with, and I ask it be considered as a base text for the purposes of this markup and without objection so ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to speak in support of the amendment in the nature of substitute. Veteran suicide remains one of the most pressing challenges facing the military and the veteran community. As a veteran myself, I may speak on behalf of other, if I can speak on other half of other veterans from this dais as well. One veteran life lost to suicide is one too many. Despite the tremendous work done by this committee over the past decade to expand the reach of VA's mental health support and get veterans the support they need, whether inside or outside the VA, we must continue to look at ways to combat the issue. The Recovery Act is critical legislation to build on our bipartisan work and expand VA delivery mental health care. My bill would create a 3-year pilot program to provide grants to outside organizations that offer mental health care services, particularly specializing organizations that focus on veterans and their families. My bill has one goal in mind: expanding the reach to even more veterans. It is not that VA is doing a bad job treating mental health, but that there are veterans for whom the standard of care is not working. My bill would try something new by creating even more partnerships between federal government and organizations that understand veterans on a personal level, delivering care that reflects that personal, not one size fits all. I believe we can help even more veterans. We know that treating trauma takes time and does not go away or take a break when the therapy session comes to an end. So why should healing? We must ensure a veteran's support does not end when their therapy session ends. Our men and women in uniform make up the finest military in the history of the world, in the large part because they are trained to fight as a unit. PTSD, TBI, and other brain and mental health issues are battles which do not stay on the field, but follow the veteran across the ranks when they return home. In this, it is a fight that they should not endure alone, and the Recovery Act is another tool to ensure they will not. The Recovery Act would provide grants to organizations that use evidence-based therapies that include family members and loved ones, a veterans unit back home to strengthen and grow their support network. These organizations train and equip families to fight these struggles as a unit. I believe this strategy will work, and that's why I'm leading this bill. The Recovery Act aims to expand access to timely, high-quality care by leveraging public-private partnerships for the benefit of the veterans. I have worked with our Health Subcommittee Chairwoman, Dr. Miller Meeks, to refine this bill based on the tremendous feedback it has received during the legislative process. I believe this bill has the right metrics in place to ensure strong oversight by requiring VA to submit a report to Congress on programs' effectiveness and efficiencies. This report would allow committees to access that work and identify improvements to better serve veterans. I would also like to thank my colleagues and our stakeholders who have worked on this legislation. Because of these reasons I have explained, I urge support for the bill, and I yield back. Do any other members wish to comment on the amendment in the nature of substitute to HR 2283? Ranking member?
Mr. Chairman, I strongly oppose this legislation and urge my colleagues to join me in opposition. I fundamentally disagree with the very premise of establishing a carve-out grant program for community providers of mental health. These providers already can and do furnish care to veterans through VA's existing community care authorities. A grant structure is not, in my view, or in VA's view, I might add, the right way to expand veterans' access to mental health services. At the legislative hearing on HR 2283 earlier this year, VA itself cited significant concerns with this bill. This grant program would direct federal dollars to outside providers with even less oversight and less accountability than exists under VA's current community care program. And I'll say for the record, I believe VA's existing community care program needs more oversight and accountability. If community providers are furnishing care to veterans who are not enrolled in VA, they should help those individuals enroll in VA healthcare or in another public or private insurance program for which they are eligible, and then seek reimbursement from those payers. Under this legislation, grantees would be able to use funds not just for direct delivery of mental health care. They would be able to use funds to establish new facilities, conduct outreach, and pay for clinician training, and, quote, support activities of the program that are not billable, reimbursable, or otherwise authorized by law, end quote. We would effectively be handing out $1.5 million per year to community providers to use far more freely than the dollars we're sending to VA's own medical facilities. Now, I appreciate that the majority has added provisions in the ANS requiring grantees to be accredited and submit quote-unquote plans for at least one of their providers have completed quote-unquote continuing education in the diagnosis and treatment of mental health conditions specific to veterans, end quote. However, a plan for one trained provider in an entire clinic for a $1.5 million a year grant is hardly a high enough bar. At the legislative hearing on this bill in January, concerns were raised by Representative Brownlee, by VA's witnesses, and by the minority's witness about the risk that this grant program could lead providers to quote-unquote double dip or even triple dip. In addition to receiving a grant, there was nothing barring them from also billing VA, Medicare, or other health plans for the very same care for the very same veteran. And while the ANS does prohibit grantees from using funds to duplicate payments by VA, any other federal payer or any other health plan, this provision is completely unenforceable. This is a grant program. Without any claims submitted as VA are receiving care, there is no way for VA or this committee to confirm providers aren't double dipping or triple dipping. The lack of claims also gives us less oversight into the quality and safety of care delivered by grantees. We'll have no claims, no return medical records, no insight at all into whether veterans are actually receiving evidence-based treatments. For these reasons, I simply cannot support this legislation, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does any other member wish to speak on the bill? Are there any amendments to the amendment of the nature of substitute for HR 2283? Hearing none. The question now occurs on the green to the Bost amendment in the nature of a substitute on HR 2283. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the nature of substitute is agreed to.
I ask for
A recorded vote has been requested in accordance with the rules. Further proceedings on this matter will be postponed. Okay. Yep. Okay, I was planning to call up HR 8010, the VA Police Recruitment and Retention Act of 2026. However, Representative Kennedy, the sponsor of the bill, has requested that it not be considered at this markup. And I'm honoring that request, and we will not consider the bill at this time. I now ask unanimous consent to consider the en bloc with the following bills: HR 3159, HR 5436, HR 5634, HR 7083, HR 5723, HR 7103, and HR 8052. Is there any objection to considering any of these bills in the en bloc? Hearing no objection, so ordered, the clerk shall report the bills.
On block number
Bills
one.
were circulated in advance and pursuant to the committee rules. I ask that the reading of the bills be suspended with and without objection, so ordered. Each of these bills has an amendment in the nature of substitute, which is I ask unanimous consent to consider as a base text and without objection, so ordered. Does any member wish to speak on any of the bills included in the en bloc? Representative Kiggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the committee for bringing my bill, the Veteran Infection Prevention Act, or the VIP Act, up for full committee markup today. This bill would require that sterile processing technicians employed by the Veterans Health Administration hold the proper professional certification for cleaning medical equipment at VA medical centers. With the proper certification of sterile processing technicians at the VA, we can take further precautionary steps in ensuring that our veterans decrease the risk of infections post-surgery or procedure. The bill passed out of the subcommittee markup for this reason today. And today I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting this legislation to better protect our veterans from an increased risk of infection post-operation. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back. Does any other person seek recognition? Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I just wanted to thank you and the ranking member for taking up my CRUISE Act, the Centralized Reimbursement for Upgraded Innovative Service Equipment Act. This is a bill that we took committee hearing testimony on previously that would require the VA to centralize payments for the Adaptive Automotive Equipment Program, or the AAE. This is the program that helps veterans who need assistive mobility modifications to vehicles. Currently, there's a tremendous backlog in the payment for those vendors who provide that service to veterans. We're trying to centralize that payment within the VA to expedite and bring about efficiency within the payment process. Right now, we're very concerned that if we don't do this, that there will be fewer vendor options available for veterans because they won't be able to get timely payment. And obviously, we don't want that to happen. I appreciate you taking up this bill today, sir.
Gentleman yields back. Ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Representative Mannion for offering long-due legislation to end the practice of colleges and universities withholding student veteran transcripts. While limited, some schools choose to hold back a student veteran's earned transcript as a way to force the veteran to finalize outstanding issues with the school. The End Transcript Withholding for Veterans Act will solve this problem for veterans. Also in this en bloc package is the improving SCRA benefit utilization from Representative McLean Delaney. The Service Member Service Relief Act, also known as SICRA, is a fantastic tool for those in the military. It provides protections like interest rate caps on auto loans, mortgage protection, and the ability to exit contracts on things like cell phones or cable service when a service member is forced to move due to their military service. However, not all service members know their rights under SICRA. This legislation aims to improve that by educating those of their rights under SICRA. Finally, I want to make a note about HR 7083, the Cruise Act. As the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 7083 is currently written, the legislation is not fully offset. This is the second time we've been asked to agree to do this. I have never been opposed to this, but this latitude has not been applied equally, and I hope moving forward it will be. I will also note that we have some policy concerns with the bill, and the majority has agreed to work with us on those edits before it proceeds to the floor. I will be supporting the en bloc package with the understanding there will be negotiations on future improvements, and urge my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Did anyone else comment? Seeing none. The question now occurs on agreeing to each of the amendments in the nature of a substitute included in the en bloc. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendments in the nature of a substitute are agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. I now recognize Ranking Member Takano for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the bills considered en bloc with amendments HR 3159 as amended, HR 5436 as amended, HR 5634 as amended, HR 7083 as amended, HR 5723 as amended, HR 7103 as amended, and HR 8052 as amended be reported favorably to the House Representatives.
There's a motion in favor of reporting the bills as amended, included with the en bloc to the House of Representatives. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill as amended are favorably reported to the House floor. I now ask unanimous consent to consider en bloc the following bills that do not have amendments: HR 6652, HR 5999, HR 7260. Hearing no objections, so ordered, the clerk shall report the bill.
On block number
The
two.
bills were circulated in advance pursuant to committee rules, and I ask that reading of the be dispensed with, and the bills be open to amendment at any point without objection, so ordered. Does any member wish to speak on any of the bills included in this en bloc? Dr. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm proud to partner with Congressman Conaway on HR 5999, the Veteran Opioid Emergency Treatment Act. This initiative is an important step forward, reducing barriers to accessing naloxone, a life-saving medication that can rapidly reverse an opioid overdose. Access to this medication should never be limited by cost or the difficulty of securing an appointment. Having been one of the millions of physicians who trained in the VA system, I've seen firsthand the unique challenges veterans face when it comes to mental health, substance use, and overdose risk. As our country continues to confront the opioid crisis, I remain deeply concerned for our veterans. In 2024 alone, over 1.7 million veterans received mental health services through VA. Research consistently shows veterans are at higher risk of overdose death, and that risk is often compounded by chronic pain, service-related injuries, and trauma. U.S. military veterans have been severely impacted by the opioid crisis, with drug overdose mortality rates rising by 53% from 2010 to 2019. To combat this, we should implement policies that center access and reduce stigma while recognizing the complex biological, psychological, and social factors impacting veterans' overdose risk. My experience as a physician is a big part of what led me to serve in Congress, where I continue to see how difficult it is to navigate the healthcare system, especially for those with complex or stigmatized needs. Supporting veterans experiencing this elevated risk requires deliberate, sustained effort to break down barriers to care. I'm proud to help advance policies that reflect the continued urgency to prevent overdose deaths among those that have sacrificed so much for all of us. I'm encouraged to see the Veteran Opioid Emergency Treatment Act move forward in the process and grateful for its inclusion in today's markup. I look forward to continuing to work with Dr. Conaway and my colleagues to carry this legislation forward and hope each member of this committee will join us in meeting veterans where they are and helping save lives. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
The gentlelady yields back. Does any other member wish to speak on the en bloc bills? Ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak in support of this en bloc, and I'm glad that this en bloc includes Dr. Conaway's bill, H.R. 5999, the Veteran Opioid Emergency Treatment Act. Dr. Conaway has been a crucial leader on this potentially life-saving effort, and I want to thank him for this work. Thank you, Dr. Conaway. This bill also will allow veterans access to naloxone. How do you say that? Naloxone at VA without a prescription and without copays. Especially for veterans, substance use disorder is a very real threat with devastating consequences. Just one person having quicker access to naloxone is a potential life saved. And I agree with Dr. Conaway that we should make it as easy as possible for veterans to access it. I'd also like to express my support for Representative King Hines' bill, H.R. 6652, the U.S. Vets of the FAS Act. This legislation will improve access to care for veterans living in the freely associated states. In exchange for exclusive military basing rights, the U.S. provides the military defense of these countries as part of a decades-long compact agreement. We also send military recruiters to the FAS and citizens of the FAS to serve in our armed forces at some of the highest rates per capita. These veterans have unique healthcare needs and experience significant cost and access barriers to receive VA healthcare. I've long supported efforts to meet these needs. I appreciate Representative King Hines' leadership in meeting those needs through this legislation, and I'm proud to support it.
Gentleman
Yield back. I yield
yields
back.
back. Does any other member wish to speak on the en bloc? Dr. Conaway.
Well, since everyone has been so kind, I would be remiss and not to thank Mr. Van Orden for his help in this as well. This is a bipartisan bill. I appreciate his efforts as well as my physician colleagues and leadership and ranking member and others. I look forward to its passage on the floor. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for putting this forward and the ranking member through the en bloc.
Does any other member wish to speak? Seeing none. Does any member offer any amendments to these bills? Hearing none. I now recognize Ranking Member Takano for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the following bills en bloc, H.R. 6652 as amended, H.R. 5999 as amended, and H.R. 760.
Good.
Okay, all right, we're all agreed.
Yeah, okay, good.
And H.R. 7260 be reported favorably to the House.
There's a motion to favorably report the bills included in the en bloc to the House of Representatives. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the bill is favorably reported to the House. I now,
Mr. Chairman, just a second. I pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice to file intent to file minority supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on this H.R. 6652, H.R. 5999, H.R. 7260, and all in the previous en bloc as well.
without objection, I now ask unanimous consent to consider the VA's fiscal year 2026 lease resolution en bloc. That resolution be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Without objection, that is so ordered. Each lease for the new VA facilities to serve veterans was requested and has a cost estimate included in the VA's budget from last year. Additionally, these leases are provided for in the fiscal year 2026 appropriation bill, which has been enacted. I urge my colleagues to approve these resolutions en bloc and advance them to the House of Representatives. Do any other members wish to comment on these resolutions as an en bloc? Ranking member.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad to support these leases to support continued access to care for veterans in the great state of Texas. These leases already approved by our colleagues in the Senate, will ensure veterans in Fort Worth, Austin, and Harlingen, Texas, have facilities that continue to meet their needs. I do have to point out that Texans in Plano are currently not having their needs met. Last July, this committee approved a lease resolution that did not match the resolutions approved by our Senate counterparts and by the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. Our failure to reconcile those differences has completely halted VA from executing this lease. Veterans in Plano cannot afford delays to a new facility much longer. I hope that this committee chooses to engage to try to resolve this standstill very, very soon. Thank you, and I yield back.
Any other members wish to speak on this? I urge my colleagues to approve these. I already said that. Do any other? Yeah, there we go. Hearing none, the question now occurs on the approval of the leases resolution in block. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Yep. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the lease resolutions are approved. It is the chair's intent, even though it looks like we're going to call votes, we're going to power through votes. Everybody grab your buttons. The postponed vote proceedings on Takano amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute of HR 7683. The question now occurs on, and is the board ready? Let me ask that before we start. Okay. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Representative Takano on HR 7683. The members will record their vote using electronic system. The chair intends to vote no.
Ranking member intends to vote yes.
The clerk will now open the vote. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Hearing none, the clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 12 noes.
There are 10 ayes and 12 noes. The amendment is not agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Proceed. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Representative Ramirez on HR 7683. Members will record their vote by using electronic voting system. The chairman intends to vote no.
Ranking member intends to vote yes.
The voting is now open. Have all members voted? Do any member wish to change their vote? Hearing none, the clerk will close the vote and announce the totals.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 12 noes.
There are 10 ayes, 12 noes. The amendment is not agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 7683. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
I request recorded vote, sir.
The recorded vote has been requested. Members will record their vote using electronic voting system. The chair intends to vote aye.
Ranking member intends to vote no.
The clerk will open the vote. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will close the vote and announce the totals.
Mr. Chairman, there are 12 ayes and 10 noes.
On this, there are 12 ayes and 10 noes. The amendment in the nature of substitute to HR 7683 is agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Representative Van Orton for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee favorably report HR 7683 as amended to the full House.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and
I ask for a recorded vote, sir.
A recorded vote has been requested. Members will record their vote using electronic voting. The chair intends to vote aye.
Ranking member intends to vote no.
The clerk now will open the vote. Have all members voted? Here we go. This favorably reporting to the floor, HR 7683, as amended. Okay.
Mr. Kennedy, are you voting?
Okay, somebody's not voting, but okay. Nope, they are. Okay. Okay, the clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 13 ayes and 9 noes.
There are 13 ayes, 9 noes. HR 7683, as amended, is favorably reported to the House without objection. The motion reconsidered is laid on the table. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment to the committee printed to HR 6993, offered by Representative Morrison. Members will record their vote using the electronic voting system. The chair intends to vote no.
Ranking member intends to vote yes.
The clerk will open the vote. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk. Someone is having trouble? Is everybody's vote recorded? There we go. The clerk will close the vote and announce the totals.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 12 noes.
There are 10 ayes and 12 noes. The amendment is not agreed to without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment printed in HR 6993 offered by Representative Takano. Members will record their vote by using electronic voting system. The chair intends to vote no.
Ranking member intends to vote yes.
The clerk will now open the vote. Have all members voted? Any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will close the vote and announce the totals.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 12 noes.
There are 10 ayes, 12 noes. The amendment is not agreed to, and without objection, the motion reconsidered laid on the table. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment to the committee print to HR 6993 offered by Representative Brownlee. Members will record their vote using electronic system. The chair intends to vote no.
Ranking member intends to vote yes.
The clerk will open the record. Have all members voted? Just seeing how fast you are. Have all members voted? Any members wish to change their vote? The clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 12 noes.
There's 10 ayes, 12 noes. The amendment is not agreed to. Without objection, the motion reconsidered is laid on the table. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment to the committee print on HR 6993 offered by Representative Dexter. Members would record their vote by electronic system. The chairman intends to vote no.
Ranking member intends to vote yes.
The clerk shall open their vote. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 9 ayes and 13 noes.
There are 9 ayes, 13 no. The amendment is not agreed to, and without objection, the motion reconsidered laid on the table. I now hold on. There's more votes here. I'm looking for that.
What is this? Oh, the beacon.
Okay, I now recognize Representative Van Orton for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that a committee favorably report HR 6993 as amended to the full House.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
No.
No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The motion,
Request a quarter vote, Mr.
a recorded vote has been requested. Members will record their vote using the electronic system. The chairman intends to vote aye.
Ranking member intends to vote no.
The clerk will open the vote. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk shall close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 13 ayes and 9 noes.
There are 13 ayes, 9 noes. HR 6993 as amended is favorably reported to the House, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment to the committee printed to the HR 6444 offered by Representative Takano. Members will record their vote using electronic system. The chairman intends to vote no.
Ranking member intends to vote yes. This amendment would begin the process of creating a presumption of service connection for blast overpressure.
The clerk will now open the vote. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will now close the vote and announce the totals.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 12 noes.
There are 10 ayes, 12 noes. The amendment is not agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Representative Van Orton for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee favorably report HR 6444 as amended to the full House.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Independent chair, the ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and HR 6444 as amended is reported favorably to the House. Well, okay, the question now occurs on agreeing to amendment number 5 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Representative Ramirez, HR 750. Members will record their vote using electronic system. The chair intends to vote no.
Ranking member intends to vote yes.
The clerk will open the roll. Have all members voted? Do any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will close the vote and announce the totals.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 12 noes.
There are 10 ayes and 12 noes. The amendment is not agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The question now occurs on agreeing with amendment number 4 to the amendment in the nature of a substitute offered by Representative Ramirez and to HR 7950. Members will record their vote using electronic voting system. The chair intends to vote no.
Ranking member intends to vote yes.
The clerk will now open the roll. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Hearing none, the clerk shall close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 ayes and 12 noes.
There are 10 ayes and 12 noes. The amendment is not agreed to, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The question now occurs on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of substitute to HR 7950. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the amendment in the nature of substitute is agreed to.
Request recorded vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Members will record their vote using electronic voting system. The chair intends to vote aye.
Ranking member intends to vote no.
The clerk will open the vote. Have all members voted?
It's not registering. There it goes.
Okay. Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 13 ayes and 9 noes.
13, there are 13 ayes, 9 noes. The amendment in the nature of substitute to HR 7950 is agreed to. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. I now recognize Representative Van Orton for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that committee favorably report HR 7950 as amended to the full House.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to, and HR 7950 as amended is
I
reported.
request a quarter vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Members will record their vote using electronic voting system. The chairman intends to vote aye,
Ranking member intends to vote no.
and the clerk will now open the vote. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 13 ayes and 9 noes.
There are 13 ayes and 9 noes. The HR 7950 as amended is favorably reported to the House and without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The committee postponed the question of agreeing to the amendment in the nature of substitute to HR 2283. Members will record their vote using electronic voting system. The chair intends to vote aye.
Ranking member intends to vote no.
The clerk will now open the vote. There it is. Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will close the vote and announce the total.
Mr. Chairman, there are 14 ayes and 8 noes.
There are 14 ayes and 8 noes. The amendment in the nature of a substitute to HR 2283 is agreed to and without objection. The motion reconsidered is laid on the table. I now recognize Representative Van Orton for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee favorably report HR 2283 as amended to the full House.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the chair, ayes have it. The motion is agreed to, and HR 2283.
I request a quarter vote.
A recorded vote has been requested. Members will record their vote using electronic system. The chair intends to vote aye.
Ranking member intends to vote no.
The clerk will open the vote.
Doc, you all right over here? You all right?
Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The clerk will,
That's all right. That's okay.
who is not recorded? Okay. The clerk will close the vote and retort.
Mr. Chairman, there are 14 ayes and 8 noes.
14 ayes and 8 noes. HR 2283, as amended, is favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. That concludes today's markup. Committee has agreed to 3 lease resolutions and voted to favorably report 16 bills to the full House. I ask unanimous consent that committee staff be authorized to make technical, clerical, and conforming changes to the bills favorably reported today and without objection so ordered.
Mr.
I
Chairman.
thank the members, and ranking member has something to say too.
Pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2, I give notice of intent to file minority, supplemental, additional, or dissenting views on all bills considered on the agenda today.
Without objection. Thank the members, and the committee is now adjourned.